Welcome back, everyone, to this segment of Mysticism Mondays. And in our first lesson, I mentioned that mysticism, which pertains to an experiential knowledge of God, you're having a spiritual, supernatural experience of God that is direct and immediate, can exist in at least two major forms: mystical phenomena, whether it's visions, stigmata, levitations, these extraordinary graces, or the path of mystical ascent, the interior ascent of the spiritual life that includes the purgative, illuminative, and unitive. And we will explore both. I wanted to touch today on an aspect of mystical phenomena, specifically visionary experiences. Visionary experiences can be technically experienced by any Christian. There's a difference between a spontaneous visionary experience or a merited visionary experience. A spontaneous one is a completely gratuitous gift from God that is unearned. So, for example, most Marian visionaries receive spontaneous visionary experiences. It means they may be individuals who didn't necessarily cultivate rich spiritual lives. Many of them are children, for example, the children of Fatima or Bernadette, the teenagers of Medjugorje. But God chose them and gave them these unexpected, spontaneous experiences that eventually lead to transformation and conversion. But they're unmerited. It means that there's nothing special about the individual. They're not a mystic to begin with. There's nothing unique about them. They're just normal people, normal kids who can receive this unmerited, spontaneous grace that is extraordinary if God has this special mission for them. There are also merited visionary experiences. These are visionary experiences that may transpire because a person actually cultivates an intense spiritual life, a deep communion and intimacy with the Lord, and sometimes the Lord may provide the individual, in the midst of this intimacy, a visionary experience. It doesn't mean that if it doesn't happen, the person isn't growing in intimacy, because not everyone is going to experience visions. But when it does happen, there are three forms of visionary experiences. There are corporal visions, imaginative visions, and intellectual visions. Corporal visions refer to seeing an apparition or a vision of, let's say, Jesus or Our Lady or maybe an angel externally with your eyes. There's an external perception as if they're appearing in front of you. So corporal is a word that signifies bodily. That means because the vision almost appears like a bodily manifestation of a spiritual presence in front of you. These type of visions are present in prominent apparition cases. Lourdes, for example, Our Lady, the Immaculate Conception appearing in front of Bernadette, the vision of Divine Mercy of Jesus to Saint Faustina appearing in front of her. And these experiences also have an interior component. They are a special grace given to the individual. That means that hundreds or thousands of people may be present, but nobody sees it except the visionary, because the visionary has been given a special interior grace for their spiritual senses to open up and to experience this three-dimensional vision in front of them. There is also a visionary experience known as the imaginative vision. The imaginative vision is a type of supernaturally infused vision that is experienced in the imagination. It is experienced in the imagination. It may be a vision of Jesus, Our Lady, or something much more active and animated, like a lot of things happening in the interior vision, or some types of symbols that may be significant to the person, but they are supernaturally infused. It's not the product of their imagination. And then the third type of visionary experience is the intellectual vision. The intellectual vision pertains to something that is not seen. It's not seen through the eyes, it's not seen through the imagination, but it's more of a type of infused supernatural knowledge that previously was not present. So, for example, I recently conducted an interview with Father Don Calloway. Father Don, years before he became a priest and was having his conversion experience as a teenager, he ran to Mass. He saw the priest elevate the host. He knew nothing about Catholic terminology, so he literally described seeing the priest elevate this white disc, and he knew nothing about it. But then came this immediate, intense illumination. He realized, that's Jesus Christ. That's the body and blood and soul and divinity of Jesus, isn't it? And this was a completely supernatural grace. That's an example of an intellectual vision. It means there was an infusion of new knowledge of spiritual realities that the person previously had no knowledge of from any natural attainments. What's interesting is there are experiences where these types of visionary encounters can be present together. So, for example, there's the famous case of Alphonse Ratisbonne, who was a Frenchman, who was a secular Jewish man with some potential involvement with Freemasonry, who was very anti-Catholic. And one day he walked into a church and he saw an apparition of the Virgin Mary, and this changed him in a moment, instantaneously, immediately. He knew that the Catholic faith is real. He knew biblical truths, theological truths. He knew the state of his soul. He knew that he was in a state that was leading to damnation, and he knew that there was a supernatural beauty before him that is sacred in the Virgin Mary. He converted to Catholicism, eventually became a priest. But notice how in his encounter, there were a few components here. There was a corporal vision because he saw her in a chapel as if she was appearing right in front of him, but there was also an intellectual vision because there was a new infusion of supernatural knowledge about sacred truths, dogmas, doctrines, theological truths about the Catholic faith that previously he had no natural knowledge of. So it's a beautiful example of God using visionary experiences to help transform a life and to bring great fruits out of it, showing us the richness of mystical graces.